And I'm Joe Wetzel. I'm with the McLean Project for the Arts, board member and founder and organizer of the Open Studio figure drawing program. Here talking to Craig English, joining us in our virtual MPA Art Fest. You know, I'm more or less a native DCer. And when I think of the DC region, I think of the Washington Monument, I think of the National Gallery of Art, and I think of Joseph Craig English.
Wow.
I mean, you have been a part of the DC scene for as long as I can remember being a scene.
Well, almost 50 years.
It's amazing. Tell us, how did you get? I know you've been making art since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, but how did you get started, and how did you end up doing prints? That was at an early age you started doing silk screening.
It's interesting. I am a local guy like you. I graduated from W.T. Woodson in Fairfax, and we did screen printing in art class, and I just absolutely loved it. And I think I was the only one in class that really was excited about it. And I think I would have been really shocked if somebody said, you know, you're opening the door to a career path. But that's exactly what I was doing. I continued to silk screen all the way through high school, and then it really drove me to want to go to art school and learn more, and that's what I did. And
You went down to Richmond. Am I remembering that?
Yeah, you know, I went down to Richmond, and it was kind of interesting. Because nobody in my family had ever sought higher education. I was the first kid in the family to go to college, and my parents didn't have any clue how to guide me. And so my grandma...
I'm sure they were thrilled when you said, I'm going to go to college and become an artist.
Well, what happened was I said, I'd like to go to college and be an artist, and they said, oh no, you can't do that, because you can't make a living as an artist. And this, remember that phrase, you can't make a living as an artist, because it comes up in my career, you know, periodically with people who are trying to be helpful. And
still to this day, I'm sure.
Oh, sure.
You must have people telling you, well, what do you really do?
Yeah. No, and so they said, well, why don't you go to, you know, your grandmother lives in Richmond, and that would be a good place, you know, if you're going away from home, you would at least have a safety net down there. Why don't you go to the University of Richmond? That seems like a nice place. And I said, well, gosh, let's go take a look. So we went down and took a look at it. Absolutely drop dead, beautiful campus. We went down in the spring, the azaleas and rhododendron were in bloom. And I said, well, this is great. Do they have any art here? He said, well, yeah, they do have a couple of art courses. But
we're hoping, Craig, that you change your mind once you get here, right?
Exactly. So I'm down there at the University of Richmond, and I'm taking all these academics, you know, and just a painting course. And I'm saying, you know, I'm not going to bloom here. This flower has been planted in unfertile soil. I've got to get out of here. And my art teacher at the University of Richmond just happened to have a husband who was the chairman of the painting department at VCU, which when I was down there was RPI, Richmond Professional Institute. And she said, what are you doing here? You need to be downtown at the art college. And I said, well, that's what I'd like to do. She said, well, I'm calling my husband right now, and we're going to get you into the art college. And that's what they did. They allowed me to put together a portfolio, although the deadline had already passed, and I submitted an application and was accepted. And before I knew it, I was down at RPI and with all the hippies, and and it was a totally different world. And I absolutely loved it. And my folks were distraught, And and they basically said, well, we don't have any money to support this. This is how are we going to do this? So I got a job, and I started out at the Y teaching swimming and athletics to little kids down there, gymnastics to little kids. And I was working 20 hours a week at the Y and going to school, but all of my academics transferred. So
Oh,
I got to take nothing but straight art. And it was wonderful, except it was very hard for me to develop friendships because I started out as a freshman and went to summer school, and the next year, instead of being with my class, I was already a sophomore.
right.
And so I did 4 years in 3. And I got to meet a lot of new people every year. I had a whole different group that I was going to school with. But
Now, when you were there, were you still doing, was your focus still on silk screens? Were you still in the printmaking world?
what was great about VCU was that they started you out in a foundation program. They wanted you to have an immersion in every type of art. So I was taking filmmaking, photography, painting, printmaking, sculpture, and then after 2 years, they asked me to declare an area of concentration. And so it's a very interesting story. I'll try to make it brief. But all the freshmen met in a theater, and each week we would be given a huge sales pitch by the chairman of a different department. Come to our department, because that's how they, support their salaries. Well, the painting and printmaking chairman came, and that was where I wanted to be, in painting and printmaking. He said, last year we had 60 seniors, and I've been in touch with every one of them. They're doing fantastic stuff. We've got 2 guys who are pumping gas at the Hess station. We've got 3 girls that are waiting tables at Bob's Big Boy. We've got a couple guys that are clerks at the department store. Well, out of 60 kids that graduated, there was nobody making art. They were all plugged in. And here, this is the word from the chairman of the painting and printmaking department. You can't make a living as an artist. Well, I was devastated. I'd left the University of Richmond. I'd come to VCU to be an artist. And they're telling me I can't make a living as an artist. So the next week, as it happened, the chairman of the Communication Arts and Design Department came. He said, well, last year we had 60 seniors graduated, and 58 of them had jobs before they graduated, because our students are the most in demand up and down the East Coast. People want our students. Design studios, advertising agencies, record companies, publishing houses. We have people in some of the best, creative think tanks in the country. Hallmark Cards comes every year and hires 2 to 3 kids out of our, senior class. I said, wow, this is where I want to be. So I declared my, concentration in communication arts and design. And when I graduated, I came back home and I got a job in an advertising agency in Chevy Chase. And by that time, I was married. I married my college sweetheart, and she was a fashion design major, and she got a job right across the street from me at Saks Fifth Avenue.
Perfect.
So here we go. But we set up a studio in our apartment, and I started making prints. And I didn't know what I was going to do with them.
Craig, they must have been small prints. I mean, when you start talking, for those who don't know, doing an edition of silk screens, if it's got more than one color, even if it has one color, you've got drying racks where you stack your sheets of paper when you do the red, and then you do your blue, and then you do whatever you're doing.
When you do it on the cheap and you don't have drying racks, you set up clotheslines.
Clothesline.
So what I did, I drilled holes in the wall and I ran nylon clothesline across the ceiling, and I bought 400 clothespins, and we hung those prints up on from the ceiling, from the line all across the room. The room was full of, it looked like, somebody was doing their wash, but they were original silk screen prints hanging up to dry. And I got a big attic fan, and I put it in the window so that we didn't suffocate ourselves from the fumes.
Yes.
And we opened the doors and the windows and turned the fan on when we were printing, and I had a studio. It wasn't until I got a house and was able to build a real respectable studio that I had my first drying rack.
I was going to say, you've come a long way since the days of clothespins. I mean, you've got quite the setup from the images that I've seen. And again, for those who don't know silk screening, it's Craig, you have to think a lot to get from the beginning to the end. I mean, from the conceptualization.
You have to be an engineer to do it right, because you have to carefully plan what you're going to do. I had developed a technique in which I always printed from light to dark. I would do a very, very careful pencil pattern, and then I would cut my stencils, and the stencil material I used would come on big rolls. Is a lacquer-based emulsion. It's coated on clear mylar, and what you would do, you would actually cut through the stencil material, leaving the mylar to support your stencil, and then you would adhere it to your screen using lacquer thinner.
Another fragrant, your neighbors must have loved you with the fumes of lacquer thinner going through the apartment building.
So you're understanding perfectly the reason that I needed to get out of there sooner than later.
You're going to be evicted.
Yeah.
Evicted because of fumes.
Yeah. So what happened was we were making prints in this little one-bedroom apartment in Chevy Chase, and I was working 40 hours a week at the advertising agency, and that first year I didn't know what I was going to do with my prints. I was just doing it to keep my sanity from working in the advertising agency, which was a real dog-eat-dog sort of situation. And I walked into the art supply store in Silver Spring, and there was a big poster, and it said, "Show and sell your work. Artist Unlimited sponsors shows all around the DC metro area." And I said, wow. So I called the lady, and she said, "Oh, we'd love to have you come and do a show at Wheaton Plaza." So I said, okay, how am I going to display my work? I didn't have a clue. And so I went to the lumber supply yard, and they had these damaged flush doors. And they were bashed in on one side, but they had one side that was good, and they were cheap. So I bought 6 flush doors, and I hinged them together. I threw them in the back of the old VW bus, and I spent some money to have some of my work framed. And I went down to Wheaton Plaza, and I had 10 prints, and I hung them up on the panels, and I sat there in a lawn chair all day. And people came by and they looked at my work, and they, yeah. So toward the end of the Sunday afternoon, there was about an hour left in the show, a lady came by and she said, I'd like to take that. And I remember the print was framed. It was $35 in the frame. And it was a 10-color silk screen print that I was very proud of. And all of a sudden the light came on. And I said, there's something here for me.
This is it. Well, we're really thrilled that you've been a part of MPA ArtFest. We're thrilled that you're sticking with us this year virtually. I like to think that it'll open up new avenues. As we said at the beginning of this, the viewer right now will have the opportunity to pause us and go look at your work online and come back to us in the middle of this conversation as if it never went away. So
Right.
hopefully this will be a great thing for you and the MPA. Craig, thank you again for being here with us today,
Oh, such a pleasure talking to you, Joe.
and we'll look forward to all kinds of success.